Unit 1, Lesson 4, The English Revolution. Unit 1, Lesson 3, Vocabulary. Throughout this lesson, we're going to be talking about England's Glorious Revolution. We're going to be looking specifically at the Magna Carta, England's Civil War, the Glorious Revolution itself, and the end product being the English Bill of Rights. First, we'll begin with a little background on the Magna Carta. When King John ruled over England, he did so with absolute power, leading England into a costly war against France, a war that England lost and that put England in heavy financial debt. In order to help pay for this debt, King John raised the taxes on the barons and nobles. The nobles quickly rebelled and forced John to sign the Magna Carta in June of 1215. This document became one of the most significant documents in recorded human history. The Magna Carta limited the power of the English monarch. It implied simply that monarchs could not rule however they wanted to, and that they must be, same as the people, governed by a set of laws. Two important clauses in the Magna Carta that are still part of British law today is that the king must have the consent of the people to tax, and of the due process of law, following established legal principles that protect individuals' rights, that an individual may not be incarcerated or locked up in jail without due process of law and having their case heard by their peers. Monarchs in the early 17th century, that's early 1600s in England, they believed in a divine right and that a monarch's right to rule came directly from God. England's first experience with this during the Enlightenment period was King James I in 1603, followed quickly by King Charles I in 1625. They both believed that their power was absolute and that no one could question them. You'll remember from our Enlightenment lecture that Thomas Hobbes was the philosopher who wrote about divine right and rule from monarchs. English Parliament was England's national legislature. It was the body that made the laws. Originally established by King Edward I in 1295, England's Parliament has been called the Model Parliament, as it had the power of the purse. They had the right to approve expenses within the land, and not just working for the king and at the king's will and desire, but ideally working for and in the best interest of the English citizens. This wasn't always the case. England's parliament primarily was made up of wealthy landowners, members of the aristocracy, and other wealthy merchants. Originally created to advise the king and help raise money through taxes, Parliament began to gain power over time and rights for English citizens. Parliament was made primarily of Protestant or Puritan individuals. Famous Enlightenment thinker John Locke, who we talked about last week, is the philosopher we think of who said sovereignty lies with the people. The ability to govern for the people is where Parliament draws its power. If we're looking at the difference between monarchs and members of Parliament, or Parliament itself as a body, King James I and King Charles I were father and son. Both liked a decadent life, a life of luxury. Parliament agrees to raise taxes for James I because he agrees to make no laws without the approval of Parliament. Well, in 1628, Charles I needs more money for war, and Parliament wants more rights for its citizens. The king agrees to the Petition of Rights, which give more rights for English people, so he can get his money. Once King Charles I receives his money to help his war, he dismisses Parliament. So Parliament and the people are not happy. This leads to the beginning of a civil war. King Charles I became king in 1625, taking over after his father, King James I. He clashed with Parliament, especially when he wanted funds and Parliament refused. After Parliament grants the funds to King Charles II, King Charles I, under the plan that he would allow petitions and certain rights for English citizens to be passed. Well, soon after, King Charles I dismisses Parliament, and for approximately 11 years, King Charles I rules over England without Parliament. So in 1642, we have the beginning of the Civil War. 7 years later, King Charles I was executed, and there was left with no monarch in power. After the execution of Charles I, the House of Commons abolished the monarchy, the House of Lords, and the official Church of England. It declared England a republic, or commonwealth in their language, and put in charge Oliver Cromwell. This essentially resulted in the Commonwealth of New England being ruled by an individual not ordained by God and the church, Oliver Cromwell, and that no ruler could claim absolute power and ignore the rule of law. Glorious Revolution came about, and it did not create a democracy, but a type of government called a limited monarchy, in which a constitution or legislative body limits the monarch's powers. In this instance, in England, it was Parliament. This happened because James II became king in 1685. He was Catholic, and England is primarily Protestant. People were afraid that James II would establish a Catholic dynasty, and people wanted to replace him with a Protestant ruler, one who was more accustomed to their beliefs and practices. Parliament asked Mary, daughter of James II, and her husband William to replace King James II. They invaded, and James II fled to France. This resulted in a bloodless and mostly peaceful revolution in which England became a constitutional monarchy where kings and queens, the first of which were King William and Queen Mary, they're limited by a binding constitution of the country. Before William and Mary could be crowned King and Queen of England, they had to accept the English Bill of Rights. Among other things, it ensured the superiority of Parliament over the monarchy, gave the House of Commons the power of the purse, or the financial power in Parliament, barred any Roman Catholic individual from sitting on the throne, and reinstated the rights of English citizens. The English Bill of Rights became a formal summary of the rights and liberties considered essential to the people, as it limited the power of the monarchy and guaranteed, amongst other things, three vital things: that there be no excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment, that there was no taxation of the people without the consent of the legislature, and gave citizens the right to petition the government with grievances.